I'm Dan Drake. This is Front Up on Geno TV and Channel 99. This is one of the series of interviews we're doing with the 6 Board of Selectmen candidates for this 2017 town election. Steve Maury, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to where you are now.
Well, I'm a native-born Nantucketer. Been here just about the full 32 years, with the exception of leave of absence for college. But I came right back every summer and immediately back after graduation. Professionally, I'm a real estate broker. I own, with partners, I own Nantucket Brokers, which is Beacon Real Estate, and also Congdon and Coleman Real Estate. So that's who I am professionally. Now, a big part of who I am is Nantucket, and I think that's a similar thing that you might be able to say about yourself, and a lot of us who choose to live out here would say. So what does it mean to be, to have Nantucket be a part of you? To me, that's always been about service and about community. That's something that was instilled in me a long time ago from my grandparents. My grandfather John was instrumental in founding the food pantry, and my parents were involved in just about every youth activity that was around.
You were involved in, and then some. Even
things that I wasn't involved in. You know, they were running the school soccer program long before any of us were really involved in that. But in any case, that's something that was instilled in me from an early age. So when I had the opportunity to come back and get involved in things, I did. So I started in town government as an alternate member of the planning board. I ran, as you know, for Board of Selectmen 4 years ago. And then I received an appointment from the Board of Selectmen to serve on the town's finance committee, where I've been for 4 years.
And you're now the vice chair.
Now I am the vice chair.
Why do you want to be a selectman?
Well, for me, it's about, again, the service to the community, being able to give back. I'm fortunate to own my own business. I can make the time to dedicate to these things. You know, in addition to town government, I'm also on the executive committee of the Nantucket Civic League and the executive board of the Rotary Club. So, you know, these issues, and I say that very generally, not the issues at hand today necessarily, but the issues that affect the town are always something that have interested me. And whereas I have the time and the interest to be involved, I think it's my duty to do so.
What are the attributes you specifically bring to the job?
I think it's the diligence. You know, I really I enjoy talking about. I enjoy investigating these issues. I enjoy talking with the stakeholders outside of meetings, and you know, really digging deep on some issues where a lot of extra thoughts needed, I think, for the right decision to be made.
What distinguishes you from the other candidates?
It's difficult to say, because you know, we've got a wide range of candidates this year with 6, and you know, we go on a whole spectrum of ages and different backgrounds. So I think what distinguishes me as one of the better candidates would be the experience, and you know, I have a real track record of looking behind the curtain. You know, really trying to find out the information that isn't readily available. And I consider my role as the vice chair of the finance committee, and my potential future role as a member of the Board of Selectmen as a representative for the people. You know, we have access sometimes to consultants and to other information that might not be published in the newspaper. So if I can find that out, make it available to the public, that's how we can reach consensus and make the best choices. What
would you consider to be your major accomplishments as a member of the finance committee?
That's a good question. You know, we had some disappointing news on the fire station bids. However, you know, one of the things that I championed over the last 18 months was looking at how can we find cheaper ways to affect the development of municipal projects. So on Monday, we found out that there was one bidder for the modular procurement process for the fire station. That number came in higher than we expected it to be. So certainly an unfortunate result. But I believe in the process that we took, which was
still more than the money that's available?
Still more than the money that's available, yeah. Yeah, it's an unfortunate happenstance, but the fact is the fire station won't be the last large construction project that we are engaged in, and we need to know if there are other ways to build these projects, which unfortunately have consistently come in over budget.
You've already answered the other part of that question, I guess, is what are your disappointments as a member of the finance committee?
You know, I've been in public service just long enough to know that sometimes the things that you're most proud of can also be the things that you know, didn't work out just the way you wanted. But if you get the process right, more often than not, the results will follow. In the case of the fire station, that didn't work out. But you know, looking for information that's not readily available, and then building consensus. In the instance of the fire station, we had unanimous support from the building work group to pursue this bid procurement method. We also, and I don't want to say it was unanimous from the finance committee because it might not have been, but we certainly had the support of that board to do this also. So.
What are the most compelling issues, in your view, facing the Board of Selectmen right now?
I tend to take a...
Other than the new firehouse.
Right, well, the new firehouse and the island home, you know, seem to be the, you know, the flashpoints right now. But I think that it's important that we take a more global perspective about who we are and where this island's headed. One of the things that I've tried to do as Vice Chair of the Finance Committee is to compel the town to effect a new population study, a comprehensive study of not, you know, who the people are that are here, but how many of us are there. And then we can look at things like a build-out analysis, you know, and see how many new dwellings might be created based on current zoning bylaw, and then we can get a reasonable projection for how many people might be here in 20, 30, 40 years. Without those numbers, it's very difficult for the Board of Selectmen, for the Finance Committee, frankly, for any of us to envision what this island might look like. So I think, you know, a comprehensive plan is always at the forefront of what the Board of Selectmen should be doing, and you know, that's one of the things I'm excited to work on if I get the opportunity.
Are there any other policy initiatives that you think the board needs to undertake?
I think that the board needs to look at ways to streamline their process. You know, our system of government is structured in a way where a lot of decisions fall to the Board of Selectmen, which might be better handled on consent. We have paid and professional staff who do a lot of things, and I'm talking about things like noise ordinances and common victualler licenses, and you know, things where we have a great permitting staff on the town. If they needed assistance, certainly you know, that could be provided for. But the fact is, we have trained professionals in these areas, and the Board of Selectmen, I believe, should be more about policy than about decision making. So that's where I'd like to see the board headed.
But specifically, are there any other policy, broader policy initiatives that you think could come into play there?
Well,
other than your population one? Yeah,
I think that the population study that I'm talking about is part and parcel of a larger strategic plan. You know, and I say strategic plan not in the sense of, you know, this is necessarily where we want to go on any particular issue, but we need to hear from the community what are the metrics by which we can judge our budget or any of the policy decisions that we make. You know, what makes the school a good school? Is it that we have new facilities? Certainly we're working in the direction there. You know, but what other metrics do we value? And I think we can go department by department and find that out, and that'll be a conversation that needs to be had with the department heads, with town administration, but importantly with the citizens of various areas.
This kind of leads to my next question, which relates to enforcement. A lot of people complain about the fact that rules and regulations in this town are not enforced, and there's a provision in one of the articles in town meeting for the technical amendments to the building code, basically, which grandfathers anybody who hasn't been caught in 10 years. Those are my words, not the words. Right. But basically, if you aren't caught by doing something without the appropriate permits and so forth, after 10 years, you're off free. Do you think that something like that's a good, this probably won't be on in time for town meeting, so it's not necessarily going to influence anybody in that, but I'm just curious, I think people are interested as to how the candidates feel about enforcement issues.
Right. You know, we have laws for a reason. You know, bylaws that we have locally were adopted by previous town meetings, and frankly, I think they need to be enforced. The idea that you know, some scofflaw can hide away for 10 years, and evidently you'd have to document that, right? You'd have to show that you were in violation of the law for 10 years. So you'd have to somehow do that, and then use that as evidence in the future that you should be able to do
I mean,
that.
the thing that the only exception is if you've been sued by somebody else. So it's leaving the enforcement up to the citizens rather than to the people charged with enforcing them.
Right. You know, on its face, that doesn't seem like a very good idea. We have in every state, I think, but certainly in Massachusetts, we have adverse possession laws. You know, if you have a fence built on your neighbor's property and, you know, you've maintained it for a certain number of years, and depending on the structure, it's a different number of years. Now it's legal. Now you own that property. But that doesn't apply
unless it's in land court.
Unless it's in land court, and unless it's municipal property. So whereas sometimes a bylaw violation might be adversarial to the town's position, I don't know, you know, if that's a carve-out exception to this proposed change, but it needs some help. I think this, on its face, doesn't seem like a very good idea.
But yeah, I mean, it really goes to the whole question of enforcement. And you said before we should enforce them, but does that mean even if we have to hire more staff to do it, we should?
Yeah, it does. I mean, we're when you wrap in the town's general fund and the school and the operating budgets, we're about $140 million a year operation.
It's a big operation.
It's a very big operation, and frankly, we could you know, handle adding some more staff if it means that we're going to get compliance with. Again, the bylaws are essentially codification of the things that we've all agreed are important.
Are there any, to change the subject, are there any recent decisions of the Board of Selectmen that you think are bad and should be reversed?
I wouldn't say, well, I was at the, recency tends to inform what we think is important, right? So I was at the Board of Selectmen meeting last week where the decision was made to enter into a modification of the waste options contract, which will allow for some tiered pricing for the mixed excavation waste disposal. Part of the discussion that the selectmen had at the time was, does this set us up for necessarily having to construct the new lined cell? And then does that make it impossible in the future if we have an obligation to pay for the construction of that cell, which will be in the millions of dollars? Does that remove from the list of possibilities that we close the dump in the future and we, you know, ship all of our waste off the island? You know, those are things that we need to discuss. Well, waste options contract comes up in a reasonably short amount of time in the context of how slowly government works. So I wouldn't say that, you know, that was a bad decision, but it's certainly a decision that may have unintended consequences in the future, and we'll need to take a hard look at that. How
did the decision play into the line versus unlined cell, or no more? Right. No constructing an additional line cell.
Yeah. So what this did was made it necessary that we will have to build that new cell. So we didn't approve the construction of the new cell, but basically it made it required that we do so. So then, if we go ahead and build that cell, and, you know, depending on how the financing of that is structured between waste options in the town, and based on historical dealings with waste options, it'll fall to the town to pay that money. You know, now we have that debt obligation. So now, does it make as much sense to close the dump and ship all our waste off island as if we hadn't made that debt obligation?
In that discussion, was there any discussion of the disposal of sewage waste in that line cell?
There wasn't. No, there wasn't discussion of that.
Because that presumably is an issue out there.
I think there's a lot of issues that we're seeing. You know, I think that plays into the Matticat sewer discussion. You know, what ecological benefits would we see from closing the dump, even if there is a cost to shipping our waste off island, maybe it makes sense. If we don't have to, then sewer-matic it. You know, if we look at the two things together, that probably is the most appropriate way to do, as opposed to them as, you know, separate but nearby issues. You know, we know.
Well, that's the question. Are they separate issues or not?
Yeah. Well, that is the question. I tend to you know, rely on the science on those issues, and if we find that runoff from the dump is a contributor to pollutants, and you know, one way to clean up the water is to sewer-matic it, well, sure, that's one way, but maybe there's another. So we need to take a hard look at it.
What else would you like the audience to know?
Just that I am sincere about my commitment to the town. You know, initially when I pulled my papers, I wasn't sure that I was going to return them. You know, frankly, I enjoy my position on the Finance Committee, and I think I've been able to learn a lot, but also do good work there. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to leave. You know,
and you have to resign if you become a selectman.
I
right?
do,
Yes.
I do. Yes, there are some other boards and committees. In fact, every other board and committee in the town you can do at the same time as Board of Selectmen, but not Finance Committee. You know, just a few months ago, the Finance Committee was shorthanded. We had 3 vacancies, and that was unfortunate. So I wasn't eager, and I'm not eager to be, you know, the reason that we might be shorthanded in the future. But I've spoken to a few people who I would consider qualified for the position, who told me they would throw their name into the ring if, you know, if a vacancy opens. So.
Good. Well, Steve, thank you very much for coming. Best
Thank
of
you.
luck to you.
I appreciate it.
The 11th, and
Yeah.
glad to have you here.
Thank you.